Hello from today's author. My name is David Ewen, and today I have Cecilia Velastegui, who is the author of the book, Lucia Zarate, The Odyssey of the Smallest Woman in the World. Welcome to the program.
Thank you so much.
It's good to have you, and we were speaking a little bit before we went on air, and we'll share it with our audience. What was it that connected you to write this story about Lucia Zarate? And she was the world's smallest woman who became a celebrity at the 1876 Philadelphia Centennial International Exhibition. Tell us a little bit about your background and how you got involved.
Well, for the last few novels that I've written, they've all been psychological thrillers with historical intrigue, and I'm a trained psychologist, so that's always been my interest. However, the seed of this particular novel occurred to me when I was traveling in France, and I saw a painting. It was just a relaxed tour that I was going through a castle, and I had lived in my youth in France. And I saw a painting and I thought it was of a cat dressed very whimsically in a dress. It turned out to be of a young girl, about a preteen girl who had, extreme hair all over her face and her hands. And it was a historical painting based on a real girl that lived in the 16th century. So when I came back to California, which is my home base, I researched that specific little girl. Her name was Antonieta Gonzalez. And many books had been written about her, and that just triggered for me to read about other young women who had some kind of a human variation about their appearance, and that led me to Lucia, the smallest woman in the world.
Now, you were telling me early on, before we went on air, that this was more of a, if I could be so bold to use the word, it was a forced situation. Is that correct?
Yes. She was a young girl from Mexico in a village outside of Veracruz, which is a port not far from New Orleans in the Gulf of Mexico. And it's very difficult. It was very difficult for me. And I've done a lot of historical research and archives and so forth to really get at the true facts about her life. But she was forced into this particular type of work, as the terminology from that era was as a sideshow freak. And she toured for 14 years, starting at the age of 12 until the age of 26. So it was, to me, having lived in other countries and having arrived in the United States roughly at the same age as she did, I couldn't even fathom traveling all over the world like she did, not knowing the language, and with her very serious limitations of her height. It's just amazing to realize that she was only 20 inches tall and weighed less than 5 pounds. So it was mind-boggling, and therefore that once an idea like that is presented to me through serendipity or the world or whatever, I have to pursue it. And it took me years to discover that it was going to be very difficult to verify so many things, and therefore it's a historical fiction, because I had to really embellish some areas to really let the world know about her.
Now, that must have been very hard to research, because there was no Google back in the day. As I mentioned, we're talking about the time period where she became a celebrity in 1876 at the Philadelphia Centennial International Exhibition. So there was a lot of archives and newspaper reports and other things. Well, to explain a little bit about the gravity, if you will, of the research that was involved with this.
Well, if you start with just a Google search, you do find a lot of things about her. There are quite a few photographs of her from that era, again, daguerreotypes and others it's really difficult to see her facial characteristics, but you can tell that she had a lot of personality. There was a gleam in her eyes, but the actual facts were very wishy-washy, and they were inaccurate. Or outright false. And so it took me a while to really, having, again, lived in Mexico for a period of time. I'm originally from South America, but I did live in Mexico, and I love to travel there. And also my familiarity with baptismal records and so forth. So looking at that, it was very, very challenging. And finally, I had to focus on the 528 articles that were written about her throughout the United States and in England, and then from there really to compile a better picture of what her life was like while she toured.
Now, you mentioned in this fictional novel that you had to embellish a little bit. Is it easy to say what percentage was true and what was embellished in this novel that's coming out in June, I believe you were telling me, in 2017?
Yes, it'll be out June 5th, 2017. And the one character that I used as to convey the relationship that she had was with her governess. We know that she did travel with a governess. That governess, from the photos that are available, is of Mexican descent, but we know nothing about her. Her name, we can assume her age again from the photos. So I really had to synthesize my knowledge about Mexican history, Mexican culture. How would her companion, her governess in 1876, what kind of a woman would she have to have been, a young woman, to travel abroad with her and to speak English? So the only conclusion that I came was that she must have been affiliated with, somehow in her family, with the trade. They had to have been trading with North Americans somehow, so that she spoke English and was confident enough to go on a ship with a little tiny charge, a small 12-year-old girl of 20 inches tall. That's it. It was just she and this tiny girl, and she had to, from there, she had to get her clothing, her attire, the tailors and so forth in New Orleans, go to New York, get photographers to photograph her, and then meet her American agents and travel all over the world. So therefore, that particular character, whom I have named Zoila, is a fictional character, but I believe it's based on my cultural knowledge of the type of young woman that could have been her governess.
So you certainly maximize the research to put everything into a factual basis to the best of anyone's ability to create this book. Again, the book is titled Lucia Zarate, The Odyssey of the Smallest Woman in the World. So tell me, the book is coming out on June 5th. How long did it take to work on the project, and what was the surprise you received while working on it?
Oh, it took 4 years, the research and the writing. There were many surprises, I suppose. The most important one to me was just the understanding that whether it was in 1876 or today, there's just a lot of young women and young people all over the world that are being exploited. So it wasn't like a surprise, a happy surprise. It was more like a sad realization that human trafficking continues in many, many forms. And that was the beginning of the first novel that I wrote, Gathering the Indigo Maidens, in 2011. Again, dealing with this notion of human trafficking today in Southern California, of young women of Latin American extraction for sexual exploitation. In Lucia's case, it was for, again, to exploit her diminutive dimensions, and the records show that she earned $25,000 during her 12 to 14 years, but she only received maybe 4,000. Her agents kept the balance, and out of those 4,000, her father took all of it and bought some land for himself, and really never saw her again.
So that was true exploitation. You were talking about human trafficking, and you've written other books on human trafficking. How much are you involved in writing and building awareness of human trafficking? You were talking about Southern California a moment ago. We're talking about the world's smallest woman, Lucia Zarate. Do you have a concern? Obviously justified, of course, but are you very much involved in building the awareness? That's my question. In what way are you building awareness for human trafficking?
I set out to write a novel, and it kind of evolves. So my mind is on it a lot. That's all I can say. I don't set out to write, let me write another novel with a theme of human trafficking. I don't do that at all. And outline my novels in such a way that I know what the themes are and so forth. But inevitably that comes through. So it must be something that I really, I have a true understanding of, perhaps, and I'm always amazed at how through the centuries it goes on and on. So it appears to some level that it's not the central theme really of other than my first novel. It's not the central theme, and yet people seem to remember those characters who have been trafficked to in some way or another, and so it just comes out. It just is.
So as people read the book, and again, the book's coming out June 5th of 2017. Again, it's called Lucia Zarate, The Odyssey of the Smallest Woman in the World by Cecilia Velastegui. What are your assumptions or expectations that the reader will get from this book?
Well, I'm hoping to have a wider readership here. I try to really think of a younger woman. I tend to have a good following with women in general. So I'm thinking of a young adult who can see a little bit of herself in the experiences of Lucia, that she wanted to be famous. And so many young women think that they are going to be famous today. She was a star in many ways, very much like, our reality stars are today. And there was a shallowness to her life for many years. And so I think that any young reader is going to sort of identify, although so long ago, 1876, I think the first thing, of course, people are going to be amazed at her dimensions. And once they grasp the actual size of that, which is unbelievable, the size of a baby, and yet that she was able to, through the years, through reading the book, how she evolved, how she realized that her charge in life was to really support her brothers and sisters. She had a very large family back in Mexico, and she obviously worked for nothing, really. She lost all the money that she earned, but enough of that went back to her family. So she felt that at least that was her role in life, was to be this tiny protectress of her brothers and sisters.
When you finished the book and put the pen down or turned off the computer, what was the unexpected revelation that you received from the work that you had completed in the 4 years it took to write Lucia Zarate, The Odyssey of the Smallest Woman in the World?
I felt that this little person gave me a lot of new knowledge, that I could branch out. There were so many things that I researched about her, and she led me to other women in history. I'm not going to really write about them, but I read about their lives. So I felt that through writing about Lucia, she really filled my life with a lot of really good information and just a good understanding about how you can be resilient, how you can really overcome a lot of obstacles. And at the end of the day, how you have to find joy in some of the silliest things that happen in life, everyday little things that happen to her. Whether she fell in love with another little person and that little person stood her up at the altar. That was a sad part, but she bounced right back and went on with life. So I think that's the biggest gift, is that resilience can be learned. And I'm hoping that the readers always also get that too, that despite things when they're really, really bleak, there is kind of a bit of hope.
So it sounds like that the book also has a good lesson in life to be shared with others. Is that right?
I think so, definitely.
And what can we expect from you? Again, I'm speaking with Cecilia Velastegui. She's the author of Lucia Zarate, The Odyssey of the Smallest Woman in the World. What other books down the road, or what style of writing, what can we expect from you for future books down the road?
Well, I'm already very deep into a book that I've researched for about 15 years, and it keeps on morphing into different things based on the geopolitical climate. One of the things that I always do in my books, I use a character from contemporary times, today, and then take them back in history somehow. And so the next book is going to take place in Venice, Italy, and it has to do with the publishing empire that took place there in the 1500s. And it's going to be a very expensive book for my publisher to publish, because I'm going to do something, and I have to keep it a secret, that hasn't been done in 300 years in publishing. So a tribute, because I'm a huge nerd, I'm a huge bibliophile. So this is something that hasn't been done, and I now know why. It's very expensive to do, but I'm going to tackle it. I'm going to continue with this theme of publishing and what it brought to the world, and how it affected people that worked in this print shop in Italy at the time.
Very good, very good. My guest today has been Cecilia Velastegui. She has written the book that's coming out on June 5th. The book is called Lucia Zarate, The Odyssey of the Smallest Woman in the World. And Lucia is known as the world's smallest woman who became a celebrity at the 1876 Philadelphia Centennial International Exhibition. Cecilia, thank you for joining me.
Thank you.
This is today's author. My name is David Ewen. Thank you for joining me.